Hello my friends, in this video we'll be taking a look at the autosomal DNA results, predicted phenotype traits, and GED match, actually not GED match, but G25 results of a medieval Breton from Quiberon, France. Now I will be sharing the raw DNA file for this sample in the um, description of this video, so you can actually download the sample and run him through GED match, so you can see what he scores with Eurogenes K13 and calculators like that. I'm not going to be showing that in the video, but you can check that yourself. Since the file will be in the description of the video, I will be showing you his results with G25 though. So with illustrative DNA, he is closest to Bretons, Welsh people, and English. These are the three closest populations to him. As you can see, his mitochondrial lineage is U4 and his Y-DNA is R1b in terms of the location that he is from. Quiberon is located in the west of France right here. I'm not sure what province that is. I think it's Nantes, but I'm not exactly sure on the on the geography of France. No, not Nantes is here, so this is not Nantes. Okay, I don't know. Maybe Quiberon is the province name. I'm not sure. So this is the province. This is the location in France that this individual is from. It's a Bretonic individual, and with the simulated G25 that I got for this individual, I used the online raw to sim G25 tool. The simulated G25 coordinate that I got for this individual is closest to French from Brittany, followed by Welsh, followed by English Cornwall, followed by English, followed by that is Irish. So it's closest to various, French and English, various Northwest Europeans, actually various Northwest Europeans of Celtic origins. As you can see, it's French of Brittany, Welsh, and English from Cornwall. All these people have Celtic origins. And then it's English, who also have partial Celtic origins. So all the closest populations to these people have some Celtic origins. So that's very revealing. All of the people that are close to this sample have some Celtic, either full Celtic origin or partial Celtic origin, as is the case with English folks who are also partially Germanic. Now, in terms of the deeper admixture, the deeper groups that comprise this individual, if we break this person down into deeper admixture, essentially this person is a mixture. All the typical stuff that's typical for Northwest Europeans, essentially unities culture with some additional remnants of the farmers and the hunter-gatherers, the European hunter-gatherers that were living in the west of Europe before the Indo-Europeans got there. So essentially, unities culture is sort of this Northwest European core, the ancestors of Proto-Celts, Proto-Germanics, who brought the Celtic and the Germanic languages to the north and west of Europe. So most of Celtic and Germanic ancestry comes back to the unities culture, but of course they also have a significant portion of ancestry from the people who lived there previously. So there's a significant portion of ancestry from the Anatolian farmers and the Western hunter-gatherers on top of the unities culture admixture that is present there. So, for example, somebody from Russia, somebody who's a Slavic person, they have extra ancestry on top of the unities culture ancestry. For example, for a Slav or a Belarusian, a Russian or a Belarusian, they will have unities culture admixture, and on top of that, also some hunter-gatherer admixture. But for a British person, they will have unities culture admixture, and on top of that, they will also have some extra farmer admixture. That is how typically, if you break it down in terms of Bronze Age admixtures, that is how this works. Um, so this is not very surprising. It's kind of a typical breakdown for a British Isles population. Nothing is too surprising about this individual. Let's go ahead and move on to this person's results with my trait predictor. So the haplogroup is R1b L51. Very interesting. L51. I'm not sure. Does that fall into the B1? Because the Y-DNA that it says here on illustrative DNA profile for this individual is R1B1. A1, B1, A1, A2, A2. I don't know what to make of that. I'm not really sure what that means. But L51 is kind of easy for me to understand. So I'm not sure what L51 exactly translates to in terms of these numbers and letters. This string of numbers and letters is very difficult for me to understand. The time period is AD, 12th century AD. Okay, so that's definitely medieval time period. Let's go and see what this person scores for the ethnic calculator with my own ethnicity calculator. Actually, I haven't seen that before, so that's going to be totally interesting for me to see. I'm very surprised to find that he's scoring closest to Kiev and Rus, followed by British, followed by Finnish. Wow, so he's closest to actual Russians with my ethnicity. With my ethnicity calculator, he's actually closer to Russians than to Brits. That's crazy. And that was done on the basis of 418 SNPs. And the closest mixture is a mixture of French plus Volga Aka. French plus Smerians from Volga Aka Iron Age. And the second closest mixture is Russians plus North Germanic. So it's kind of okay. It's an okay prediction. It's not that horrible. Keep in mind that it's a calculator that's built like hand by hand, hard coded. And it's very, the way it was built is very like archaic. Uh, it's okay. I mean, it's okay. The way it's okay. It's not horrible. It accurately predicted this person to be Northern European. Um, it didn't say it's African or East Asian. I guess it's sort of somewhat accurate. It was in the ballpark. British came up even, so I guess it was sort of in the ballpark. I mean, I even saw French in the Oracle, French plus Volga Aka, so I guess it was okay. Um, by this metric, it wasn't that bad. But the ethnicity calculator is kind of not the strong part of my trade predictor at all. Let's see what he scores for the Naxch calculator results. This is definitely the strong part of the trade predictor. The Naxch calculator results. That's what I do. That's what I do best. So when it comes to that, he's definitely got brown or hazel eye color, so he's quite dark. Although he also has quite a high chance for blue eyes with a neighbor center and green eyes. That's also a pretty big chance. 11.9% for blue eyes with a neighbor center and 7.6 for green eyes is quite a large percentage. He doesn't have blue eyes. That's very unlikely for him. And he probably doesn't have darkest brown eyes either. That's also quite unlikely for him. So most likely his eye color falls somewhere in the range from brown to blue with a neighbor center. Most likely. For hair color likelihood for him, most likely his hair color is dark brown or light brown. So essentially, most likely his hair color is some kind of shade of brown. Dark blonde is also possible at 14.7%, but most likely his hair color is some shade of brown. For skin color, most likely his skin color is olive or Mediterranean. So he's quite a dark featured person. He's not particularly light in terms of color. I would say he's darker than the average. Well, actually, I don't know. I don't even know if he's darker than the average for northern France, because French people tend to be, at least from my impression, quite a dark group of people. For hair texture, looks like he's got wavy hair, wavy, straight, or curly hair. Definitely not kinky hair. This was very quite precise. So definitely doesn't have kinky hair. Most likely has straight or curly or wavy hair. And for nose shape, looks like he's got snub nose shape. So for nose shape, quite definite precision that he does not have Greek nose shape. He's got a more of a snub nose shape. Well, it's quite common to see um, Northwest Europeans with snub nose shapes. There is Morrissey comes to mind. If you look up Morrissey from the Smiths, I think he has a snub nose shape. Yep, he has a very like his nose is kind of like that. So it's kind of common to see noses like that in Northwest Europeans, I think. So let's see about the eye color and see what contributed to that. So he has heterozygous genotype for blue haplotype 3. He has blue haplotype 2. Actually, no, he doesn't. Okay, so he has something weird going on. He has two light color variants in this variation, but none in this variation. Typically, you would have these two variations are linked. So typically, you'd have the same number for these two. Typically, if the number that you have here is gonna be the same as the number you have here. So it's very weird that there is total mismatch for the two numbers for these two variations. There is a dislinkage that happened here. And by the way, these two variations, they're located right next to each other. So this is the tightest linkage out of all of these variations that are mentioned on the screen. These two have the tightest linkage. So it's all the more interesting that there is such a big um, that there's such a big discrepancy in this file between the genotype in this variation and this variation. I'm actually going to be very interested to see what Snipper Free is going to classify this person as. I feel like Snipper Free is going to say it's going to have hazel eyes. I feel like Snipper Free is going to say hazel for him. We can actually check that right now because I have this tool. We can check it right now. I think Snipper Free is going to say hazel. We can check right now. Let's see. Yeah, so you see Snipper Free says 68 times more likely hazel than brown and 38,000 times more likely hazel than blue. So, yeah, Snipper Free says hazel. But, okay. This kind of a genotype is just really uncommon, and I feel like it might be the result of some kind of genotyping error with the file. But no, it's not. It's not. It's not because there's also this and there's also this. It's not a genotyping error. Because how do you have two light color variants here but none here and none here? It's not a genotyping error. It's just a really very interesting dislinkage that happened in this person's genome. Definitely very surprising and very interesting to see what happened. So when it comes to this person, I think the easiest way to approach classifying this person's eye color and hair color is to just approach it using Bayesian methods and go bias and P rather than using haplotypes. So that's what my tool does. That's what my trait predictors Naxch code does. So this kind of prediction is the most accurate kind of prediction you're gonna get for this person. By the way, if you run him through YSEC, they're gonna say he has blue eyes, which is completely, totally inaccurate because that basically only looks at this one genotype and says, well, you have two light color variants here, you're gonna have blue eyes, and that completely disregards the other very important, very significant genotypes such as this one or this one. It completely disregards all the other significant genotypes located in the same region. Anyway, he does not have any light color variants in MC1R, and he does not have any light color variants in this variation of Keto G either. And very interesting. Okay, let's see what he scores for the Phenotype Oracle. The closest phenotypes to him looks like the closest phenotype to him is actually this, which is very interesting. Reminds me of another actress, actually. There is an actress from The Office. She played Erin, who looks kind of similar to this. Followed by this phenotype, which is kind of like an alpinate phenotype. Followed by this phenotype, which is kind of like, I don't even know. Doesn't remind me of anybody in particular, but looks kind of average. And for the mixtures, the closest two-way mixtures, looks like the closest mixture is a mixture of 50% NAD plus 50% NAD. The reason he's scoring so much for these like potato, I don't want to come off as offensive, but the reason he's scoring so much for these potato-looking phenotypes is because he was scoring snub-shaped nose, right? If he wasn't scoring so much for snub-shaped nose, he wouldn't be scoring these potato phenotypes. But because he's scoring snub-shaped nose, he's got potato phenotypes in the Oracle. Like you see these potato-looking people in the Oracle. That's because of the snub-shaped nose for the prediction. Because the morphology actually plays a part in the Oracle, a direct part. So snub-shaped nose means you're gonna get potato-looking people in your Oracle. That's how it works. Okay. Let's see what he scores for the biomarkers. Okay, for the biomarkers, looks like he's got above average levels of vitamin D, below average level of LDL cholesterol, below average level of HDL cholesterol, below average level of glucose levels, above average level of hemoglobin, slightly above average blood pressure, slightly below average level of iron in the blood, above average level of sex hormone binding globulin, above average level of red blood cell count in blood, slightly below average telomere length, which is kind of unfortunate, and slightly below average height. Okay, let's see the polygenic risk scores now. Looks like he's got a predisposition to slightly above average odds for migraine, slightly below average odds for lupus, average odds for gout, below average odds for thyroid cancer, below average odds for eczema, average odds for exfoliation glaucoma, average odds for open angle glaucoma, average odds for primary congenital glaucoma, average odds for polycystic ovary syndrome, average odds for cataracts, average odds for age-related macular degeneration, very high odds for rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, so he's got a predisposition to rheumatoid arthritis. He's got slightly below average odds for Tourette's. He's got average odds for epilepsy. He's got slightly above average odds for asthma. He's got slightly above average odds for leukemia. He's got slightly above, actually pretty significantly higher than average odds for vitiligo. He's got higher than average odds for myopia. He's got higher than average odds for primary biliary cirrhosis. He's got average odds for stroke. He's got very high odds for male pattern hair loss, which is not surprising because he's a European. Europeans tend to score higher for that. He's got slightly below average odds for atrial fibrillation. He's got slightly below average odds for deep vein thrombosis. He's got slightly below average, actually pretty much spot on average odds for unipolar depression. He's got very low odds for bipolar type 1, so he definitely does not have bipolar type 1. Wow, really cool. Actually, this might be among the lowest scores for bipolar type 1 I've seen. He's got very low odds for schizophrenia. Really cool. He's got average odds for type 2 diabetes, and he's got slightly below average odds for type 1 diabetes. He's got slightly above average odds for Alzheimer's. He's got below average odds for multiple sclerosis. No risk variance for breast cancer. 6 risk variance for testicular cancer, and one heterozygous genotype in kettle G gene. 2 risk variance for celiac disease out of 8. Pretty typical stuff. No risk variance for GSS. 8 risk variance for Crohn's out of 16. Kind of bad, actually. No risk variance for Riefenstein's. No risk variance for Parkinson's. 2 risk variance for Gilbert syndrome. No risk variance for basal cell carcinoma. No risk variance for GCD. No risk variance for Waardenburg. No risk variance for familiar thoracic aneurysm. I can't even pronounce that. 1 risk variance for myosclerosis. I can't even pronounce these diseases, to be honest. I've been adding them yesterday, but I can't even pronounce what they're called. So none of these rare diseases. He doesn't even have any risk variance for any of these rare conditions that I've been adding yesterday. So that's pretty good. So the only things that we really have to watch out for is male pattern hair loss. And what I found really interesting is that he has very low predispositions to things like bipolar and schizophrenia. When it comes to hold on, let's scroll up a little bit. I have to digest this information a little bit more. There's something more I have to talk about. Rheumatoid arthritis is very interesting. So we have to let's look up rheumatoid arthritis in the file and see what genotypes he has for it. So he has a genotype that lowers the risk of rheumatoid arthritis, and he has a genotype that greatly increases the risk of rheumatoid arthritis. Okay, interesting. Okay, let's go through the monogenic traits. So it looks like he has a predisposition to warrior phenotype based on his genotype in COMT, MAOA, and MAOB. Even though he has GG in COMT MET variation, looks like based on the other genotypes, there's some other genotypes that sort of balance that out a little bit. So overall, the percentages are not as extremely scaled to being warrior. He has some other genotypes for warrior traits as well, but overall he's still scoring a little bit more. His percentages are still scaled a little bit more to the warrior side of things. When it comes to D2, it looks like he has a predisposition to less D2 dopamine receptor sites in the brain, which has some advantages, such as being better at no-go learning. And when it comes to 5-HT, serotonin levels, looks like he has a predisposition to lower levels of 5-HT, which actually doesn't really have any advantages. It's kind of not so good because increased risk of depression and anxiety, stuff like that. He doesn't have any predisposition to dwarfism, which is really good. He has a genotype which predisposes him to be a heavy drinker if he was an alcoholic. Okay. He has a predisposition to higher odds of autism, based on the genotypes relevant to autism. By the way, this panel for higher for autism odds, it actually doesn't take into account only the genotypes relevant to autism, but all the genotypes relevant to autism, not only those on this panel. So for lactose persistence, it looks like he's heterozygous for this variation in MCM6. However, he actually has two derived variants for European lactose persistence in this other variation, so he actually is probably lactose persistent overall. Totally lactose persistent. Even if he didn't carry the variant in this variation, he still would be lactose persistent. But the fact that he carries homozygous variants for European lactose persistence here, and he also carries heterozygous variants for lactose persistence here, means he definitely is lactose persistent. Very, very good. He definitely carries the European variants for lactose persistence. Well, he's a medieval individual, and by that point, everybody in Europe was already lactose persistent. For OXTR and the empathy gene, it looks like he has a predisposition to lower levels of empathy based on the genotypes in OXTR, which is definitely very interesting. He actually has some genotypes in OXTR that code for higher levels of empathy, such as, for example, this genotype right here, which codes for higher levels of empathy in oxytocin. But overall, if you look at all of his genotypes in the OXTR region, it looks like he has more variants for lower levels of empathy than not. So if you take everything into account, it looks like he has more variants for lower levels of empathy. Okay, for hemochromatosis, the person who originally requested that I make this video, I think they asked me, they check for the Celtic curse. You should check the Celtic curse in the sample genome, but you do with all the samples. So we're gonna check the Celtic curse. Does the person have any Celtic curse variants? So GG in cis282 tier, which means not a carrier for the C282Y hemochromatosis mutation, no C282Y hemochromatosis mutation, and no H63D variants. So no H63D variants, and also no S65C variants. So no, this person, this Breton from France, does not carry any hemochromatosis variants, no Celtic curse. It looks like this person, looks like this Breton from medieval France does not carry any risk variants for hemochromatosis. Very, very interesting. Okay. Should I talk about this on the right? I feel like it's very very difficult to make content out of that. For multiple sclerosis, no risk variance for multiple sclerosis in the HLA gene. So we remember he was scoring low for that, for the multiple sclerosis panel. For Alzheimer's, no risk variance for Alzheimer's in APOE, which is really good to see. For cardiovascular disease panel, looks like he has a predisposition to intermediate odds of cardiovascular issues overall, which is quite good. For myopia panel, he was scoring high for myopia, higher than average. He does not have the G allele here, which would protect from myopia. And for facial morphology panel, no East Asian genotype in EDAR. He does have this genotype, which leads to longer mid-face length, higher odds of protruding nasal bridge, intermediate nose size, and a genotype for slightly thicker eyebrows. For vitiligo panel, he does have genotypes in HLA, which corresponds to higher odds of vitiligo. And we do remember that he was scoring high for the risk score of vitiligo. So let's look it up, actually. Vitiligo. Yeah, so he was scoring above average for the risk of vitiligo. And of course, that makes sense because he has risk variants for vitiligo in the HLA gene. Okay, makes sense. Another thing that's kind of crazy about this sample, I just noticed, is he carries the micropenis mutation, but I noticed that with these samples, it looks like a lot of them do. And I feel like it's due to genotyping error. It's due to faulty chips and not due to actual the samples actually carrying the micropenis mutation. So disregard that. I feel like it's not genuine. So disregard that. I don't really think he carried the micropenis mutation. But that would be funny if he did. Anyway, impaired muscle performance, likely endurance athlete rather than strength or power athlete. Likely does not have 4x knees reflex, but carries one allele for 4x knees reflex. And not an Asian flusher, lower odds of alcoholism, lower normal risk of esophageal cancer. Okay, for I don't even know if I can talk about that stuff here. For SCN9A gene panel, it looks like he has no variants for increased pain sensitivity, no risk variants for pain hypersensitivity out of 2 total. For alcoholism panel, looks like his risk score for alcoholism is slightly below average, really good to see. No risk variants for familial Mediterranean fever. Not a carrier for any of the cutaneous albinism mutations, really good stuff to see. For MTHFR gene panel, looks like he has a genotype for reduced efficiency in processing folic acid. Actually, significant reduction in efficiency in processing folic acid, 80 to 90% reduction in efficiency in processing folic acid, which leads to a great increase in the odds for a variety of illnesses from autism to coronary heart disease. Okay. For leukemia panel, looks like he has a genotype that increases the odds of leukemia, but another genotype that greatly reduces the odds of leukemia. For rare diseases and traits panel, looks like he has a genotype that leads to a increase in the risk of glaucoma. I think it's exfoliation glaucoma, but I'm not sure. It should be exfoliation glaucoma in most populations. One variant for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, very interesting. And that's it. I don't see any other any other rare diseases that he carries risks for. I just see one variant for Ehlers-Danlos syndrome that he has a risk for. For celiac disease panel, looks like he has 2 risk variants in CCR3, and that's it. For androgen receptor gene panel, looks like he has a genotype here, which leads to a typical or higher odds for baldness. Crohn's disease panel, nothing relevant was found. Canavan syndrome, no risk variants. For HIV and AIDS panel, looks like he has one protective variant in here, which leads to 60% reduction in HIV viral load, so he is quite protected from HIV. For the HLA gene panel, looks like he has a predisposition to lower odds of autoimmune disease, which is really good to see. So it looks like he actually is a little bit protected from autoimmune disease based on his genotype in the HLA gene. And based on his genotypes in the MTRR gene panel, it looks like he has a predisposition to overall, he's quite healthy, but he has one risk variant for spina bifida and disorders of intracellular collagen metabolism in the MTRR gene. For muscular dystrophy myopathies, looks like he doesn't have any risk variants for that, except for one risk variant in this variation. Let's look it up, actually. Let's look it up. It's quite common. Not that big of a deal. And for color blindness panel, looks like he has one risk variant and OPN1SW for color blindness out of 4. Quite typical stuff. I know just a lot of samples do, so it's not that big of a deal. For FCO gene panel, looks like he's homozygous for fat gene variants here, which leads to higher risk of obesity. And he actually has another genotype which leads to much higher BMI, and another genotype which is heterozygous, which leads to higher odds of obesity and sleep apnea. So it looks like he actually does have some fat gene variants in FTO. Overall, he's a little bit predisposed to obesity based on that, but he does have some other genotypes that are not in FTO gene, which correlate to lower BMI and lower odds of obesity. Based on his genotype in the syncope panel, looks like he has a slight predisposition to lower odds of syncope. And if you look at the biotraits panel, looks like he has a increase in the risk of nicotine dependence, reduced response to alcohol, and therefore slightly increased risk of alcohol abuse, as well as indirect contribution to the risk of lung cancer through an increase in the risk of nicotine dependence based on his genotype in this variation right here. He has another genotype which leads to a typical genotype that's associated with lower or average risk of migraine, which is good. So he is a little bit predisposed to lower risk of migraine. He has lower risk of hypertension and obesity and lower response to Viagra, less weight gain when treated with clozapine. Clozapine is an antipsychotic medicine used to treat schizophrenia. He has one copy of the hunter-gatherer CLT-CL1 gene variant and one copy of the farmer variant, which leads to intermediate ability to process carbs and sugars. The farmer allele is C. He has intermediate predisposition to anger. He has wet earwax, normal smelly or body odor, normal colostrum, which is typical for non-East Asians. East Asians tend to exhibit a dry earwax and non-smelly body odor. We're gonna move on to the vitamins and levels panel. I'm only gonna discuss certain things here. So he has slightly lower protection of neurons against glutamate toxicity and slightly decreased rate of glutamate degradation, and he has average or intermediate levels of B12. He has intermediate B6 levels, and he has, for blood type, his blood type is actually type A, which is very, very interesting. Very precise prediction right here. Definitely type A blood type. The likelihood of all other blood types here is very low. All of it is below 1%. So we know for sure that the most likely blood type for him is type A. Everything else is quite improbable. That's pretty much all that I wanted to cover for this sample. That's all I wanted to say, all I wanted to touch on. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching until the very end. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If you were entertained, drop a like. Also, I want to encourage you to go to my itch page, which will be in the description of the video, and buy my tool. Um, it will be all the updates, everything that you see in this video, all the features that you see in this video will be pushed onto the itch store page on May 22nd. So all of these updates will be there on May 22nd and more. I'm adding stuff. I'm adding new functionalities. I'm adding new tools there, adding new features, and all of that will be on the itch page on May 22nd. As well as, but the price will rise up as well. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Peace out.